I look more for properties that I know that I can bring value back to it. Most properties have more than one use potential if you look at it with a creative eye. So that's when I look at a building and it's just sitting there, nobody wants it, I like to look at it and say, what can I do with it?
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And Icon Realty Group, helping home buyers, sellers, and investors in the West Michigan area. Find out more at theiconrealtygroup.com.
Have you ever owned or lived in a haunted house? Have you or your tenants ever encountered unexplained phenomena? If you have any real-life ghost stories, we'd love to hear them. The best will be compiled for a very special Halloween episode. Nothing is too scary or off limits. As long as it happened to you or someone you know, we want to hear about it. Email me at brian@higinvestor.com by Friday, October 6th to share your story.
Hello and welcome to episode 90. My guest today is Ann Finkler, an explorer, entrepreneur, investor, property manager, consummate learner, and high-risk taker. She's a licensed realtor for Midwest Properties of Michigan. She specializes in commercial, residential, and investment real estate, as well as leasing. She and her family have also been in the restoration business, and Ann is also the past president of the Rental Property Owners Association and a real estate investor herself. Ann, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
There's a lot that I did not fit into that introduction. Why don't you fill in some of the blanks and tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Well, I'm from Grand Rapids, from West Michigan all my life, but I am a avid traveler and an explorer type of person. I'm a generalist, so my background is in many things, but all related to property, whether it's construction, restoration, rehab, buying, selling, working for others, and also working for myself.
Now, you describe yourself as a high-risk taker. How does that pertain to your real estate experiences?
It basically has taught me lessons that it's not always good to be a high-risk taker. So I've learned to recognize that about myself because it tends to create losses if you go too quickly with that. But it has also forced me to learn new things very quickly by doing things versus just talking about it, listening, and reading about it.
So give me some examples. Like what's an example of a risk that you took that paid off?
Well, for instance, I bought a industrial building that was empty. I took a huge loan on it at the time, which I look back and that was probably not a good idea. But I was very confident that I could take that piece of property and change it in such a way that I could fill it. Theoretically, I could have totally lost everything, I guess, if you look at it that way. But I looked at it from I was willing to take the risk.
So, all right. So this is interesting. An industrial building, how many square foot?
36,000.
36,000 square foot industrial building.
Yes.
What year was this?
Good question.
Because I'm wondering,
I want to say 2000. No, it was before the drop. So it was like 2003, 2004, high of the market, actually.
Height of the market.
Yes.
Vacant.
Yes.
And you were able to get a loan on it?
I was. Again, it was before 2008.
It was when they were loaning
much
on anything,
more easily lending, yes.
So why was it vacant, and what did you see in the property that made you think you could turn it around?
Well, number one, the reason it was vacant, I believe the business that was in it had gone down and basically got too small to be able to handle it. There was problems with the building from the perspective of the seller, where the building was leaking, blah, 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 things that I knew that I could fix. So it looked worse to the seller than actually, in my opinion, it was. And number two, I was also looking for a place to put my construction business at the time. So I knew I could fill a little piece of it. And
so you had a business already that was ready to go
so
into this 36,000
so that's one of
square foot.
the things that I do is if I create a business or have a business or know of a business that's looking for something, I basically try to find a property that fits into that, if that makes any sense.
Okay.
So it helps me carry the basic carrying costs. So at least I'm not necessarily going in, full bore naked, if you want to call it that.
Right. So the risk that you took was somewhat mitigated by the fact that you were going to take up some of this space with your company.
Right.
How much? So let's kind of talk through that industrial space. So do you mind saying how much you paid for it?
Over $1 million.
Over $1 million. Okay. Okay. So this is a big risk.
Yeah.
This is a big risk.
Yes.
Your construction business that you already owned, how many square foot did that take up of the 36,000 square foot?
Less than a quarter. As I'm thinking about it, there was one tenant in that building. They had a third of it at the time.
Okay.
But it was a long-term lease, not very strong lease as far as dollars. So it did not carry the building.
Okay. So you had a legacy tenant with a
Yes.
long-term lease.
Yes.
You're pretty much stuck with that, right? I mean, you can't really renegotiate
Yes, pretty much,
that
yes.
lease.
Right, correct.
So all you can do, if they're taking up a third, you can fill up the other 2/3 of the
Correct.
building. You were able to fill up a quarter of it with your business.
Correct.
What strategy did you employ then once you took possession?
What I realized very quickly is when the markets start changing, because here, we talk 2008, 2009 drop. In Grand Rapids here, the construction side of the world actually was dropping long before that. We just didn't feel it yet. So being in the construction business, I started noticing that already in 2006. And I realized that our tenant population was dropping in the business side, and the likelihood of having a large tenant take over big properties was not going to happen. I was becoming very aware of that. So I suddenly realized that, okay, I have this building. It was originally 36,000 square feet taken by one tenant. Well, there was no tenants at that time that would take that. So how do I take this building? The utilities are not separated. How do I make it so I can have 4 or 5 or 6 tenants fill that during bad times? So basically, that's what I started doing. I would take a tenant that needed maybe higher electric in one area, and he came in and was willing to pay for the electric to upgrade that little space that he took. Meanwhile, I wasn't making money.
Willing to pay for the electric
upgrade,
or?
yes, in exchange for me giving him decent rent. Nothing exorbitant, but at least what it did was it carried the building, at least part of it. It helped me upgrade the space. I wasn't making money on it yet, if that's part of it, but he basically paid to upgrade the building, if you want to call it that. Meanwhile, then I added bathrooms, little at a time. Basically, I made the space so I can flex it. I can flex it to a bunch of small tenants. I can flex it to 2 tenants. I can flex it to 1 tenant, depending on the nature of what the economy's doing, basically.
So you were somewhat ahead of the curve then, because the whole flex space concept is now much more in vogue.
Yes, you're right. Yes, you're right. And at that time, warehousing was fleeing Michigan. So if you have a building that could be warehousing, there was no tenants. Mm-hmm. So it was a little bit of a scary time going into 2007, 2008.
So how long did it take you to kind of work your strategy and lease out the rest of the building?
I leased it out quite quickly. My problem was my tenants were not just these tenants, but all tenants were in trouble over 08, 09 in the commercial industries. So my strategy always is to think long term. So even if I'm not making tons of money, I need to carry the property, I need to make it sound, and I need to make sure my tenants are sound as well. And that might mean ratcheting back leasing the lease amounts, or being somehow flexible and taking care of them so they can flourish as well.
So you had some of your tenants come into you and say,
yes,
we just can't afford
absolutely.
the lease. We can't
That's
afford
right.
the monthly payments.
That's right.
How did you work with them?
Sometimes I froze tenants or the leases. Sometimes I gave them different things that could help their business grow or maintain. Like maybe more parking, different signage, help them with the utilities. I don't know, things. It wasn't just this building; it was all my buildings at the time. Even the office buildings. People were hurting, and if I didn't give in a little bit, if I had been rigid, I would have been empty. Mm-hmm. So
because you were flexible and willing to work with your tenants,
yes,
you were able to stay in business.
Yes.
When did you see things start to turn around?
Probably 2010 or 11. Mm-hmm. I'm going, maybe it's been since then, maybe 2012.
It's a good thing you were able to hang on and you had that sort of long-term vision, because now there's a lack of good industrial space.
That's correct. I wish I could build more right now. Exactly.
Yeah. So how is that property doing now?
It's doing fine. One thing that did happen over the 08, 09 is the banks got very hostile. So I learned to be very cautious with commercial debt. Most people don't realize, because I work in the residential world and the commercial world, most people think, at least in the landlord business, you buy 1 to 4 family homes and you have debt. That the debt is protected by laws that we have that protect us. They can't foreclose on you for certain things, as long as you're paying your bills, blah, blah, blah. In commercial, that's not necessarily true. They can call you for things that you have no idea that you can call for.
For example, what did you experience some of those costs?
Yes, I had many of my clients and many of my tenants and myself. The banks during 2008 and 9 called loans that were totally, completely performing because they could. So the protections are not there on the commercial side that we take for granted in the residential side, even as investors. So you have to be, I've learned to be very cautious with commercial paper because the law is definitely on the bank side, not on the borrower's side.
Yeah, and if you read the commercial mortgage contracts or loan contracts, it's definitely stacked in their favor.
Exactly, and they're your best friend in good times, but they are not your friend in bad times. That's what I've learned.
So since we're talking about caution in the commercial lending world, how do you sort of protect yourself going forward?
I actually stay away from banks as much as I can.
Really?
So I try to use private money or money that I know the person involved, so I can literally negotiate if I have to, face to face. If things go bad, I want that person on my side, not against me.
So you're bringing in the full amount from private investors?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, okay.
Myself or private investors or somebody that I know that I can trust.
Okay, so you must have some deep-pocketed investors who can come in with that kind of money.
I don't know about deep-pocketed. There's a lot of money out there if they trust you.
Are you syndicating, or are you going?
No. It's just private people that we trust, and sometimes you take on partners. So partners are very powerful. You just got to be careful how you structure it and who you're working with. It's all based on trust. That's actually the West Michigan traditional way, is trust. It's one thing I learned through all this is I used to think my father and my grandfather, who were actually very good business people, and they were old-fashioned. They didn't believe in debt, all these things that I thought was old-fashioned. You know, you go to school, you go to the financial classes, and they all tell you take on debt, do this, other people's money. And I've learned the hard way that my father and my grandfather were correct. It's easy to make, how do I say it? It's easy to take risks when you have easy money.
Let's talk about that. The lessons you learned the hard way and some of the risks you took that may not have paid off. Do you have an example of that?
Well, yes. Before 2008, I've been in the construction business all my life, and we started to buy many properties to rehab in the city, and using hard money lending and short-term loans. You know, the idea: buy it, rehab it, refinance it, and flip it, or hold it as a rental. That sounds good when things are good, but when banks pull back, and I literally had banks call my loans in the middle of construction, where I had guys to pay, materials already delivered, things were there, and they would not give me their draws. Literally, I'm there. How do I pay people when they won't pay the draws? What do you do?
So I've talked to other investors on this show who face the same exact thing. How did you handle that?
Some of the properties went back to the bank or the lenders after having very long heart-to-heart conversations with the people. But bottom line, I've learned that you have to meet one-on-one with people and negotiate and say, hey, this isn't going to happen. We have to change course here. We have to renegotiate. And if you're true and do what you say, I've learned that people will work with you. Just like I try to work with my tenants, people will work with you as well as an investor, as long as you do what you say. And
people will work with you, but it doesn't sound like the banks would work with you.
Banks do not. That's correct. Well, I shouldn't say that. Local banks do. Mm-hmm. If they're true, if they're good, if they have good loan officers.
So you had some better experiences with the local banks here as opposed to some of the more nationwide banks.
Correct.
I mean, I like the topic of high risk.
Yeah.
Taking some risks. What are some of the other risks that you've taken?
Well, I bought a building in Heritage Hill and turned it into a bed and breakfast. I did not plan on buying that for a bed and breakfast. I bought it again at the high end market. We made an offer and they took it. And like, uh-oh, we were going to make apartment complex out of it, and the neighbors weren't too kind about that. And we started looking at the property, and I'm definitely a historical buff. I love historical homes and historical properties. And we started looking at it, and she was in beautiful condition structurally and conditioned as far as the trims. If we had turned that into apartments, it would have ruined it.
Was it one of the like nice Victorian homes?
Actually, it's called Edwardian. It's an English,
Edwardian, huh?
yes. So we started researching what to do with the property, and we turned it into a bed and breakfast. Now, that could totally have easily failed. I've never been in the bed and breakfast business. My partners had never been in the bed and breakfast business, but we created it.
So were you cooking breakfast for
Yes,
so
yes,
you also had to
exactly.
become a chef.
So you
as
learn
well,
marketing, you learn hospitality, you learn things that you never knew you had to learn.
Wow, so that's something you just jumped right into.
Yes,
huh?
totally.
How did that turn out for you?
It turned out okay. The city's been difficult. That's when I learned a lot of lessons. Zoning being one thing. You got to make sure your zoning is what you really want and where you're headed.
Yeah,
'Cause that can be a very big thorn in your side.
Yeah, how did that process go? Because I've been through the zoning process in
Yes.
Heritage Hill.
It
and
was
I know
excruciating.
It can be excruciating, yeah.
Yes.
You have to go before
Especially
the
when
BZA.
you don't fit their mold of what they want. So that's what I've learned also the hard way.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com. I'd also like to tell you about Joshua Schaub and his team at Icon Realty Group, a full-service real estate company in the West Michigan area. Joshua has been a guest on this show several times, and he and his team at Icon Realty Group help buyers gain an edge in this competitive market. They assist sellers in getting the best price and terms for their properties, and they work with investors to understand the numbers, neighborhoods, and market forces that will set them up for long-term success. To learn more and get a free, no-obligation consultation, contact Joshua at 616-216-2000 or visit theiconrealtygroup.com. What did they want, and what was some of the opposition to what you were proposing to do?
I'm still not totally sure what they all want. I think there was different factions. So I suspect the neighborhoods, and I'm not speaking of just Heritage Hill, a lot of the neighborhoods in Grand Rapids are experiencing growth pains. So they don't want change. They don't want the growth in their neighborhoods in the sense of more traffic, more noise, more perceived, whatever that is. So they push back. The city's pushing for more business, more, things to do for people that are moving here or visiting, because we are growing very rapidly.
Yeah.
So there's a growing pain. I call it growing pain. And at that point in time, I think I got caught in between those kinds of factions. And being that zoning is residential there, and I'm doing a commercial practice, the two don't mix. And the zoning and the ordinances don't necessarily, you can't work in both. You can't live in both worlds and be okay in most jurisdictions, I've learned. Mm-hmm. So if you want to be commercial, you better be in a commercial zoning, or you're probably going to pay for it.
Yeah. So, but you were able to successfully change the zoning to be able to.
We got a
put bed and
variance.
breakfast
A
in.
variance.
You got a variance.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So a use variance. And,
correct.
Is the bed and breakfast still in operation?
It is still in operation. I have sold the property, so it's doing very well as far as I know. Yes.
Really?
Yep.
So did you do all right with that?
Yeah.
Because you bought it at the height of the market.
Yes.
So that was one of those things where it could have gone
Yes.
south.
At the
pretty
time, we
easily.
thought I was going to be a quick flip, and that's another thing I've learned. Again, you have to have plan A, plan B, plan C. What are you going to do with the property if what you think is going to happen doesn't happen?
So plan A was quick flip.
Yes.
The market changed, and you
Right.
realized you had to hold on to it.
You had to hold.
Then Plan B, it sounds like, was
Create
let's
a
turn
business.
it into it sounds like it was turn it into apartments.
Yes, that was right.
And then
Correct.
plan B didn't work out, so you went to
Right.
Plan C, which was create a business,
Create a business.
do a bed and breakfast.
Exactly.
Even during the downturn, was the bed and
Yes.
breakfast
It held its
pretty
own.
well
Yes.
received?
Yes, it's amazing how many people travel to Grand Rapids. We don't even realize it when you live here.
Yeah, and back at that period, there was a real lack of hotels.
Yes,
in the
there's more
downtown
coming
area.
in now, though. We definitely
Oh, yeah.
need it.
Yeah,
So
more hotels on
yes.
the way. Well, that's a great example of a high risk. What are some? It sounds like you're varied in the type of investments you do.
Yes, I look more for properties that I know that I can bring value back to it. Maybe it's because I grew up in the construction business, in the rehab business. Actually, not the rehab, restoration. Most properties have more than one use potential if you look at it with a creative eye. So that's when I look at a building and it's just sitting there and nobody wants it, I like to look at it and say, what can I do with it?
Really? So
And
that's
my-
where you start. With
Yes,
the creative,
Yes.
just imagining what it could be.
Exactly. And then, okay, how do I make it actually cash flow viable? I mean, and where do you get the money from to rehab it? Can I share that dream or that idea with somebody that buys into it also? Whether it's partners or financing.
Take me through that process then, like with another example of a building you saw that got your creative juices flowing.
Basically, the way I look at property, for instance, I'll take a property and if I don't have the money to do the rehab and to carry the paper, because it takes money to carry it before you can put a business into it. Sometimes I will find partners that want to learn, usually young people. They're very ambitious. They're young. They want to learn things. So what I do is, okay, let's talk about that. What is your skill? What can you bring to the table? Sometimes they are hands-on. That's what I'm looking for, is people are hands-on. So maybe what I've done is, okay, I will bring the money to the table to buy the property. I need you to bring the labor. You're not going to get paid for your labor, but you're going to get equity of the property in the long term. So if they get the dream and the idea, they will buy in. Basically, they earn their equity. So once we're done with the project, I've been able to use my money to carry it. The rehabbing is basically just for the materials, and the labor is with partners. So they get to enjoy equity at a very young age and hopefully learn things as they go, if that makes any sense.
Oh, yeah,
That's
absolutely.
one
absolutely.
creative strategy that I have used.
Yeah. Yeah, because doing these projects can be very time consuming
And very expensive.
and very expensive. It sounds like you sometimes prefer to be the one who brings the money in and let someone else do a lot of the work.
Correct.
And the heavy lifting.
Right, the
when it comes
physical,
to
the physical work, right.
Yeah.
I'm also blessed to be married to a very credible hands-on person, and I'm surrounded by a family that's very hands-on. So it's in my surrounded people group.
Do you give me an example then of a deal you've done, a project that you've
even
taken
residential
on?
properties. I will look at a property that other people say is not fixable.
Like what?
Well, there's been properties in Heritage Hill. We bought a couple of them that were drug houses, for instance. And I remember one, I could not even get appraiser to step foot in the house. It was
Really?
so bad. I think I went through 4 appraisers. The 4th one finally followed me in because it was so
Were they
bad.
worried about fumes or what?
It was
were they?
bugs. There was dead cats in there. There was junk. It was probably 3 foot of junk in there. Who knows? The smell was overwhelming. And water damage. It was mold. It was bad. Mm-hmm. I agree, it was bad. And
Doesn't sound that bad.
so I took a piece of property, and landlords see it all. But what happens is you see things that other people don't see the value in it. Because I look at
What
structure.
did you see then when you looked at that?
Well, I saw a historical home that needed to be brought back.
Edwardian?
Not this one. This is a different one. But this particular property was a drug house, and
And when you say drug house, people were using drugs? People were
yes,
cooking
dealing
meth?
out of it. There was pretty much like needles and paraphernalia everywhere. I mean,
wow.
it was bad, and it was an eyesore and a problem to that block in the neighborhood. And I think because we took that house back and changed it, you help change neighborhoods, and that's how I look at it. Because I wanted to bring historical value back to that property.
And how did you go about doing that? First of all, were you buying it from a bank, a seller? I mean, how much were
We did
were you
several
able
of
to
them.
pick it up
Some of them
for?
we took from the bank. I actually had banks that sometimes will call me and say, can you please buy this property? We don't know what to do with it.
Oh, wow. Okay. You get a pretty good deal on properties like that?
Fair, yeah. I've learned to negotiate a little harder than I used to after the downturn, but yes.
Yeah.
But sometimes they just don't know what to do with the property. And if you have the know-how how to bring a property back, most people don't. They don't. They see it as a problem.
As a lost cause.
Yes, and I don't do what you call low-end rehabs, if that makes any sense.
You're going to make it nice.
I make it nice because my goal, that's a good example. I could have made those properties just, basic trim, basic this, basic, but they're historical neighborhoods. My end goal was to rent to high-end paying college students. At that time, everybody was afraid of college students. And I found them to be the best tenants ever because, especially if they're in their fourth year or their graduate school, they are serious students.
Serious college
and
students.
they usually don't have credit, so they basically need me. They're young enough where they haven't been, how do you say, in the tenant world, they haven't learned to be professional tenants and be vindictive. They want to do well, they want to take care of the property, and they want to learn how to do that. And if you are in the position to give them a high-end quality property, I've learned that they actually take care of it better, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, so that's a good strategy. And there's here in Grand Rapids, there's a lot of higher end students.
Yes,
more mature.
Yes, more now than there was 15 years ago. But yes, definitely,
absolutely. It's sticking with that example. You picked up that property. How do you go into something like that and start turning it around? I mean, it's historic, and I know that you and your family are involved in historic restoration as well.
Yes.
So, using that as an example, what did you do to it?
That particular property, well, I did several in those neighborhoods, but that particular, we pretty much had to take it down to studs because it was so bad. It was so, the mold and the smell and the bugs were bad.
So if you take it down to the studs, are you then replacing the plaster that you usually find in? So
that one I
you're
did.
Actually restoring it with plaster.
But a lot of times I do not. I do not. I will. What I try to do in most of these properties is I try to keep the historical value, but add modern convenience like air conditioning, like granite countertops. But I want it to look historical, and we've even made custom-made trims to match whatever was there. I try to match and honor the history of the house. And that's what most contractors and most landlords don't do because they see it as a cost. And it is costly if you poke at it, if you want to do that. If you have guys that are workers that are very aware of what historical things are, that's the key.
Yeah, so you have a team that does that.
Yes.
Is it your team restoration? Is that
team restoration, and there's I have other groups that surround that can be called on. We have a lot of good craftsmen here in Grand Rapids.
Yeah, well, especially in the historic areas,
Exactly.
There's a lot of people who know how to work with those homes. Let's kind of talk about that a little bit. Team restoration. I know that's a family business.
Yes.
And you were doing disaster restoration,
Yes.
Restoration of old homes.
Well, I grew up in the restoration business and with my father, and I sold that business years ago. And this particular business, Team Restoration, was started with my son and myself and my brother. And since then, my brother has gone his own way, and my son now runs that company.
Okay.
So we started that one from scratch.
And one of the things that's kind of timely with restoration is we have all these hurricanes going on.
Yes.
So you're seeing a lot of the type of damage that Team Restoration usually works with. What advice do you have for people in those situations?
People that have experienced the damage?
Yeah, the type of damage that you typically would see,
Yes.
and some just things that you wish people would do differently to help prevent some of that damage.
The number 1 and 2 things in restoration work is, number 1, you better know your agent. You're as good as your agent. Seriously. Your insurance agent. Literally, if you've not had any damage done yet, get to know your agent. Take him out for coffee, him or her. get to know them personally, and ask a lot of questions, because they ultimately are your best friend or your worst enemy in a claim situation.
They're the ones who are either going to fight for you
Exactly.
or just roll over. and
Exactly.
die.
And ask some really penetrating questions like what ifs, because there's a lot of small print that if they're not on your side, you could be in trouble, and there's nothing you can do about it after a claim starts.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2, in restoration work, the biggest thing is get the water out of the house. If your roof is leaking, if there's a tree through it, stop the water. The water I think, is the most damaging thing in any home. That's why I feel terribly sorry for these people that are in these hurricanes, because you can't stop the water until that recedes.
Yeah.
Because that's where bacteria, mold, everything comes from.
But even in those situations,
Yes.
once they stop the water, priority number 1 is get the water out of the house.
Yes, dry it out fast as possible. Mold will start within 24 to 48 hours. If you start selling that smell, that's you got a problem. So dry it out as fast as you can. And one thing to think about mold, it needs 3 things to survive. It needs heat, it needs moisture, and it needs food. So the idea is to take out one of those things. So
It needs heat,
moisture, and food to grow.
So what's the technique to take out each
For
of those
instance,
things?
if you can't stop the water, you better not have something like drywall, because it lives in drywall. That's its food. So take the drywall, take the food away, take the carpet out, take something that the food is, or you take the water out, remove the food, remove the water, because again, it can't survive without the water, the moisture. Fire damage is a big one. We've done explosions. We've done one of our favorites. Sounds crazy, but vehicle damage, where people accidentally run into a building.
Ouch.
So it's fun because it's more structural instead of just show.
What? Yeah, and there's really no way to prevent vehicle damage. Because I guess anyone could drive into your
Exactly.
house,
It's usually kids or someone thought they hit the gas or the brake and they hit the gas and they run through the back of their garage.
What's the first thing you do if someone drives into your house?
Good question. Call your insurance agent.
Your insurance agent. Huh?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So no, think and call team restoration. But basically, at that point, you need to shore up the property so it doesn't hurt you or more things. So
Yeah. And in a fire situation,
Yes.
what's the first thing you do?
after calling your
After calling your
adjuster,
insurance
yes.
agent.
Again, secure the property. Usually, there's going to be penetration to the roof or something that for vandalism or more damage to the property. That's the first thing an adjuster or insurance company will call too. Please secure the property if you can.
Secure it.
Yep.
Secure it by plugging up any holes that might have
Yep.
been created that water.
Again,
or
more
rain
water
can get
damage is
into.
worse. In fact, in fire damage, what's funny is it's the water that they use to put it out that causes the most damage, more than even than the smoke.
Really?
Yes.
Is there any alternative to the water?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I'm sure there's
fire
different
out,
things, but if you think about it, that's the water that causes the problem.
Yeah, I can see that.
What I've learned in the restoration work all these years is sometimes the worst part of it is not from the damage. It's from what you run into, the living situations that the people were in before they had the damage, if that makes any sense.
So maybe the damage occurred before.
It occurred, and actually was probably the best thing that ever happened to that property.
Like what are you talking about? Like
I've been in
hoarders or-
places that the plumbing hadn't been working or septic hasn't been working in years. And, there was a fire, but it was what you had to clean up in addition to the fire that was the worst.
Oh, really?
Landlords can relate.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So you see all types
yes.
of living conditions.
There was another interesting one is we were called on a job that this gentleman was older, went into the hospital. His son went to go light the furnace, went downstairs and didn't realize there was a gas leak. So he lit it and literally it blew up, but it blew him up the stairs, out the door, out the house.
Oh, wow.
Otherwise, and he survived,
Really?
but it could have killed him.
Wow.
But that was weird. It blew the whole house off the foundation. It was really, really crazy. So we see weird things like that.
He just popped out of that house like a cork. Huh?
Yeah. So lesson, don't light a match when you got a gas leak.
Yeah. Yeah. How would he know? How would he have known there was a gas leak?
Well,
Would he have smelled it?
theoretically, you can smell it, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So I don't know what he was thinking.
I guess you can always test for a gas leak with a match. Huh?
That's right. Yeah, right. Well, the good thing about insurance is there's no stupid clause. So we've seen people cut trees down and it lands on their house or on their neighbor's house, things like that.
Really?
Yeah, so that's not fun.
So hire a professional. To
Exactly.
take down
Well,
those
or at least
trees.
know what you're doing. Be competent before you do something.
Now you obviously have many talents, many businesses. You're very entrepreneurial minded. You're also
I am.
a licensed realtor.
I am.
And so talk about that a little bit. How does that fit into the puzzle that you?
Well, it's
put
interesting that
together
you bring
for
that
us?
up because I never dreamed of being a realtor. I started out in construction. And when I sold my first business, I found myself retired and didn't know what to do with myself other than I was buying properties. And I suddenly realized that in the state of Michigan, you're supposed to be licensed if you buy so many properties. So I thought, you know what, I better get licensed. So I did not go into the business thinking this is my job, my next career. I went into it to basically, number one, learn more, but number two, to be licensed because I was doing so much for myself and my family at the time. And number three, why not? If you're doing the transaction, why not be licensed for yourself? So I literally went and got my classes taken, and then I went to search for a broker. Because a lot of people say, well, why don't you work for a commercial broker? Because you're in the commercial business. And I guess it's my nature that because I don't really fit them and I don't fit the residential side, because I don't work for my broker, I work for myself. Does that make sense? Because I'm so interested in so many things, I don't fit any one box.
Are you? Do you work with clients?
I do.
So
yes.
you have
Yes.
residential and commercial
Yes.
clients. So you are an active
Yes.
realtor, not just
Yes, I am.
out there.
I don't advertise like I used to. I used to be very active and very busy, and I had people working for me and teams and all that type of thing, offices, secretaries, the whole 9 yards. And I realized that basically I was working for all my employees and, yeah, making good money, but at what cost? You know, stress and so many expenses. And when the downturn happened, I realized, you know what? I can make just as much or more working way less by being choosy about what I want to do. So that's when I've scaled back my property management and I do what I love to do. And sometimes that's for myself or my friends or my family that want to do something interesting with property. And I have partners that I refer other business to as well.
Yeah. So go back a little bit. You said after you sold your first business, you retired.
I did.
So could you have stayed retired all this time?
I probably could have, yeah.
So you were pretty much out of the rat race.
I was. In fact, I was traveling. It was just 9/11 that stopped me from traveling at the time.
Oh, really?
We were retired, or my husband could retire because I did. And we were traveling, and 9/11 happened, and it kind of brought us home. And like, okay, you know, tapping your foot. What do you do now? What do I do now? Because I found retirement to be very boring. You can always travel and sit on a beach and do, you know, drink Mai Tais only so long before I get bored.
So you had to stay creative, had
Yes,
to
yes.
stay active. Got back into the game,
Yes.
but you're still in it. I mean, it seems like you could walk away from it at any.
I probably could. But I've learned that life is not about making money. It's about enjoying what you do. And for me, what I love to do is property and create things with other people, especially young people that want to learn something. You know, I'm good at helping them do that.
What do you look for when you work with younger people who
A sense of urgency
a sense
and
of
a want to learn and a willingness to do whatever it takes, good or bad. I've always said with partnerships, the worst 2 times for a partnership is when things are going very well or very bad. That's when it tests your relationship.
why is that?
Because when things are going really well and easy, people get cocky, they get extravagant, they get lazy, they think they're all that, and that's dangerous to a partnership and actually to a business. When things go bad, things are stressful, there's no money, things are tight, things get scary, and you start fighting because you're afraid. So both sides, I think, are very dangerous to probably any relationship, whether it's a marriage or a partnership. They're basically the same, in my opinion. So you have to prepare the mindset with both directions with people. And I've had very successful partnerships in many directions, and usually comes from people that are willing to do whatever it takes and want to learn.
What about some of the not successful partnerships? Did they not work because of some of the reasons you just suggested, or?
Yes, I think what I've learned is you have to have a similar mindset of what you're in it for. You have to know your why. If you don't know your why and those whys don't match, you're not going to get along. I don't care who you are and how great a person's both of you are, or more of you are. Mm-hmm. So if you have the same whys and you have the same work ethic, if you will, the rest can come as long as you communicate very consistently.
So what would your why be?
My why is to create.
It sounds like you've done a little bit of everything.
I have.
You've had
good or bad
businesses, commercial real estate, residential real estate. What are some of the things that you're trying out now?
Actually, I'm interested in international things, so I spend much time outside of the country now, and right now I'm focusing on South America, but I'm looking for opportunity, whether it's partnerships with people there, real estate there, learning their laws, learning their ideas, what are they doing differently than us? And to me, that's just another thing to learn.
So you're looking to do some investing
I am.
in South America?
I am.
Whereabouts in South America?
I spend most of my time in Argentina, in a little country called Uruguay.
Okay.
And some southern Brazil. Right now I'm just meeting people, learning how they operate. Their rules are I've learned to appreciate United States and Michigan. Our rules, for as much as we complain about them, are very consistent. We have an amazing system that doesn't happen around the world, but it makes it interesting to learn.
Now you describe yourself as an explorer as well.
Yes.
Is it an explorer of just through travel, or exploring other?
For me,
other
I
ways?
would call it explorer of ideas and travel. Travel is part of that, but I like new things. I think I have a form of ADD, because I get bored very quickly with things that don't change, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. And that's what I've learned. Again, risk taking. I learned that if I don't keep moving on to something else, I will break it so I can fix it again if it's running well. I've learned that about myself.
If you say that again,
if I have something like a business running very well, if I don't mind start looking at something else to do, I will break it so I can refix it.
Oh, really?
I like to fix things and make problem solve and start new things. And what happens is if something's running well, why would you break it? But I learned about myself that I will tend to break it so I can refix it.
So is that sometimes helpful, or is that more destructive?
It's destructive. That's that's the downside of being, I guess, ADD or a risk taker, because I get bored very quickly. So I need to keep learning to keep my mind happy, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. So, and you're also involved with the Rental Property Owners Association, or you have been in the past.
I have been, yeah. Yes.
What were some of your focuses when you were president of the RPOA?
My focuses, one of my passions is to convince or teach people that they are capable of doing more than they think. Many landlords, they poke at it. They think they have to do everything themselves. They think they can't do it for whatever reason. No money, no skill, no whatever, if only. Instead, my goal is always to take somebody to tell them that, yeah, you can do anything you put your mind to it. If you want it bad enough, it's a sense of urgency. So what does that look like? Is it systems? Is it education? It's usually relationships. It's who you know. But sometimes my passion's been to hopefully pass that on to people, and that's about freedom.
What are some of the things you see other investors doing that you think they could do better, or that you would do differently?
I see many that think they can get rich quick. So they either cut corners, or basically, for a better way of saying it, they screw other people, whether it's intentional or unintentional, because they think that's the way it's done. And it's not. That's the farthest from the truth. I also see that they think they have to do everything themselves, the cheap way. And they don't realize that they haven't looked at what their talents are, and they should be maybe looking at buying more properties instead of picking up the hammer, because they may not be so good after all with it. So I think people don't ask the why, and then they don't look at themselves to see what their skills are.
So you had also mentioned an office building investment that you did. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes. Actually, my family found this property. It had gone to the bank, and it was purchased, and it went back to the bank again. And my father actually bought it, and it was empty.
Empty office building? How many square feet?
Let's see. How much did that have? Probably 30 to 40,000.
30 to 40,000. Okay,
Yeah,
so
30
it's
to 40,000 square feet.
It's a pretty good size office building then.
We were able to fill it over time. He bought it right, so that was the key, is to buy it right.
Bought it at
so
the right price.
yes. But I remember during the downturn, where do you find tenant? I literally knocking on doors asking if people were interested in moving. I mean, it sounds crazy, but that's actually what I did. Yeah. But I applied the same principle. We divided it in such a way that the office was flex. So we could either add more offices, less offices, more floors. One company could take 1 floor, 2 floors, multiple floors. And again, it was the flexing that made the difference in carrying that property and making it successful.
Yeah. How's it doing today?
We sold it. So it's been totally rehabbed and changed.
Okay.
So, yeah.
But it turned out to be a good investment.
Yeah, it was good
you.
for the family. Yes. Yes.
Well, as we wrap it up, Ann, I'm wondering if you have any advice for our listeners.
I would say after many years of what I've done is the biggest thing is to guard how you think and what you allow your mind to be controlled with. Because most of our decisions, when I look back, my bad decisions were made out of fear. And I think fear comes from what you allow yourself to listen to. And that, for me, that includes the news. That includes TV. That includes people in my life that tell me what I can't do instead of how or why or how I can do it. So to me, it's guarding how you think.
So dig into that a little deeper. So where do you see the fear today? What are people fearful of right now?
Well, some people, and I would say myself in the past, are afraid of what I don't know or afraid that I'm not good enough. That's a fear. If I'm successful, I'm afraid of losing money. I've made good money in business and go to investment and you lose it right away. So this idea that money can be made very quickly and, quick cash or whatever, it's true to some extent, but if you make it easily and quickly, usually you will lose it quickly because you really didn't know why you made it. So the key to me is to learn the principles of why things work or don't work and apply them consistently like farming instead of hunting or quick flash in the pan, get rich quick idea. Because if you don't, you will lose it just as fast.
And you said you also mentioned things that people have told you could or couldn't do. What are some of those things people might have told you couldn't do in the past that you were able to prove them wrong? What I couldn't do, people used to tell me, don't get your hopes up. You're too young. That's ridiculous. You can't do that. Whatever the idea was. So I've learned not to take that on anymore. You set a goal or a dream. I don't call them goals. I call them themes. I've set themes in my life of what makes me happy and what I want to go after. And it doesn't matter what other people think. In fact, the more negative they become, the more positive I am going towards what I'm going for. That means they're more afraid than I am. They're reacting out of fear.
They're reacting out of fear, either because they care about me and they're afraid for me, or they're afraid of me as a competitor. And I don't look at competition as a negative thing. I think we should be collaborating, not competing. Because that's where power is. It's collaborating with each other, and we bring each other up and teach each other how things do work instead of why they can't work.
Yeah, which brings us back to the RPOA. That's one of the things that the RPOA
totally
believes in is we're not, even though we are competitors,
exactly.
We're all in the same boat. Let's learn how to help each other and work together.
I think that's something my dad taught me years ago. That's another one, a fear of losing an opportunity. So you see something, oh my gosh, I got to go buy it right now because somebody else might take it. I might lose this opportunity. He taught me that you stand one place, turn around 360 degrees right now, and I guarantee you there's at least 2 deals looking at you right now. There's 1,000 deals, no matter what the market is, good or bad or even. There are so many deals out there. The fear of losing a deal is the wrong decision. Do not use that fear to control your decision. You will make the wrong decision.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Well, Ann, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with us today.
Yeah, it's been fun.
It's been a fascinating conversation. Yes. And you've got so many things that you've done and that you've got going on. So thanks for sharing them with us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And Icon Realty Group, helping home buyers, sellers, and investors in the West Michigan area. Find out more at theiconrealtygroup.com.
Have you ever owned or lived in a haunted house? Have you or your tenants ever encountered unexplained phenomena? If you have any real-life ghost stories, we'd love to hear them. The best will be compiled for a very special Halloween episode. Nothing is too scary or off limits. As long as it happened to you or someone you know, we want to hear about it. Email me at brian@higinvestor.com by Friday, October 6th to share your story.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.